All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to this is part three or episode three of my rebuttal and breakdown of the Light and Truth letter. A few things right out the gates here. Thank you everyone for the feedback. I'm going to try and be a little more. Before it's just kind of off the cuff. I still want to keep it that way. I haven't read this letter before. I'm going through it with all of you. This is just my initial reactions, but this time I'm going to try and keep in mind some of the best arguments and kind of temper things a little bit, just take into consideration some of the feedback that I got. Um, so we're going to be starting off, this is where we left off, the building up versus tearing down. And we've got a quote from Sam Rayburn here. It says, "Any jackass can kick down a barn, but it takes a good carpenter to build one." All right. The sheer hatred in the critical community alarmed me. I could not identify with that. It never felt like we were building something, only tearing down. I owed a lot to the church, and even in my worst faith crisis moments, I felt gratitude for my upbringing. I'm just going to read the whole paragraph. "Not all critics become bitter, and I applaud those who are not. To be united by hatred is a quick and easy way to feel unity, but it is temporary. I could not imagine living my life identifying myself by what I am not. For example, an ex-Mormon. I find so much more purpose in building up pessimists, in building up. Pessimists rarely build anything meaningful." So right out the gates, I think he acknowledges that not all critics become bitter. I would say that the majority of critics don't become, maybe not the majority, but the most prominent critics that I know of haven't become bitter. Um, Many of them have built things. I've went over this in a recent video, as my last video, I'm pretty sure, where I talk about, do Mormon critics only tear down or do they build up? And we went over, I would definitely recommend that video, but I go over how Bill Reel created a podcast with over 100 episodes called the Almost Awakened podcast. And I would put Bill Reel as probably the number two. RFM, still to this day, has left up his old apologetics for Mormonism. It's not like he's only tearing down. And then John Dehlin, I would argue, is the most prominent voice in the ex-Mormon community. He created a 70-plus episode podcast called The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis, in which his only goals is to help split faith marriages and to help people deal with this and to help build them up. John has also created Thrive events. If I go Thrive, hold on, this is not the right account here. I'm supposed to be on this account here. Matthew. Here it is. Either way. Is this my... Hello? Okay. I'm just trying to keep it a little more clean here. Oh my gosh, please, dark mode. Okay, everyone. Sorry, I was just going to look up real quick. Oh my goodness. How do I... Here it is. Just real quick. Gift of a Mormon Faith Crisis. Right here. Created by John Dehlin. Wonderful resource. Really helps people to not... it encourages relationships with their family and friends. Helps people to know how to talk with them. Like, so many good resources here. Bill Reel, Almost Awakened. These are huge things to build people up. How to creating a fulfilling romantic relationship. He'll just go over every single topic you could think of. And then the last thing that I wanted to look up here was Thrive. This is once again another thing that John Dehlin has created to help build things. Also, I would point to the large movement to not be called ex-Mormon and to label to use the label post-Mormon instead. So I feel like some of those were recognized. Maybe some other communities that I'm not familiar with, such as the ex-Mormon Reddit, maybe those aren't as kind. But I will say, to be united by hatred, it is quick and easy. But I feel like a lot of people move on. It's kind of the whole 7 stages of grief. Once someone feels like they've truly lost this significant part of their life, they need to grieve. And anger is a big step in that. And so that community is constantly churning out new people. And there's people who are trying to point people in a better direction in those communities a lot of the time. But people need to feel that anger, that sadness, that loss. I would also argue that there's so much that I feel like in conference they try and unite, um, maybe not based on hatred, but just like us versus them mentality with some of the rhetoric that has been coming out of some of the more recent general conferences. Also, if you are a conservative and you are united by your hatred for liberals, I mean, I think that's super common, and vice versa. Liberals being super angry at conservatives. Pessimists rarely build anything meaningful. I don't even know about that statement. I just don't know. I feel like it's like opinionated, whether or not you determine if someone's a pessimist or whether they self-identify as one. So, anyways, above all, I was alarmed by the critics' strategic use of distrust in family. A faithful church member once had a child come to them and identify as LGBTQ+. The child said, "Are you going to kick me out of the house?" The bewildered father sat in stunned silence. What in the world had given his daughter that impression? What church or family home evening lesson gave that vulnerable child the idea that she would be ostracized if she identified as LGBTQ+? The answer is complex, but I cannot help but sense that critics bear some responsibility. Misguided critics imply to their targets that a doubter's family and church will abandon them. These critics calculate the right things to say to influence the victim, to see things in their ward and family members that may not even be there. They lead the victim into a self-fulfilling prophecy. In psychology, this is called the personal expectancy effect, and using this tactic is wrong. Don't critics realize that they can create the very thing they warn us about? So I take actually huge issue with this whole paragraph. First off, I just really dislike the broad use of critics, because once again, I'm going to be viewing this letter from only the most prominent critics. And the most prominent critics do not say this. For example, The Gift of a Mormon Faith Crisis, created by John DeLynn, he talks about the most likely answer that you are going to get if you tell a faithful member that you have left the church. And he literally says the response is nothing. He says the most likely response you're going to get is crickets. So that's one thing. The second thing is LGBTQ+. What could cause them to feel this way? Maybe it is not... I don't know why this gets roped in with Mormonism, but LGBTQ+ in all of their stories of... you can just go on really any forum, ask people for their stories. They can show you text messages of them opening up to their parents and how their parents just respond so viscerally and like, "Get out of my house. You only have get out. I don't want you here. You're dead to me." Like, those are things that happen. And this isn't just unique to our faith, which is another thing that I find interesting, that they try and make it seem like the critics of Mormonism, because I can think of even faith-promoting movies. For example, God is Not Dead. It's a pretty terrible movie, but maybe that's for a different day. But I watched it, and in that movie, the whole point is like, it's a Christian apologist kid trying to prove that God exists to an atheist teacher. And even in that piece of propaganda where they are trying to push the agenda of Jesus and Christianity, they still, in that movie, show a woman, a young girl, who becomes Christian and her family kicks her out. I think her family is supposedly supposed to be like Muslim or something like that. So it's not even critics. We're talking like, this is just seen out in the world, this kind of response. And it's not because critics are setting you up this way. It's because this is a genuine thing that happens all the time to members of the LGBTQ+ community, but also people, every faith. It's a very common thing for people who come out, or they change their faith, or they come out as not believing in their faith, to then be ostracized and to receive very visceral reactions from their parents. And I, just from my own experience, I mean, I can totally, I've totally seen the other side of things. Like, I was fully active, very Orthodox member when I had a family member whose spouse, their significant other, left the church. And I remember like telling that family member, "Hey, you should get a divorce," or at least talking about them behind their back and saying, "You should just get divorced. They should get divorced." Like, I've lived it, and that's not just me. Like I don't believe that's just a me thing. Like, I'm just hateful and that just happened to me because that's who I am and that's my temperament. And a true saint or a true Christian wouldn't have done that. Like, that's the no true Scotsman fallacy. I'm giving this example because, like, this literally, like, I felt it. I've been on the other side. I know what it feels like. And I think that this is a common thing that happens, getting kicked out, especially if you're LGBTQ. But I don't think it comes from critics. I think it comes from the stories of other LGBTQ members overwhelmingly. And then also, I think it just comes from the media in general. I don't see this just being a critics of the church thing. So I don't know what's happening here with this distrust in family. In fact, even if I think back to Jeremy Runnels, I listened to, or I must have read something he put out. Someone asked him, how do I go about talking to my family members about these issues? And he literally said, he's like, well, I wouldn't try and argue with them. I would just try and ask them genuine questions. Like, I feel like so much about the main critics of the church, this just isn't true and doesn't apply. Jesus taught, seek and you shall find. I believe this simple phrase is not only a spiritual promise, it is a statement of fact. If we seek reasons to be angry, to doubt, to be bitter or alone, we will find them too. However, if we seek joy, if we look for reasons to rejoice and to happily follow the Savior, we will find them. We rarely find something we are not looking for. Are you looking for joy? Dieter F. Uchtdorf, a higher joy. I would argue, if seeking you should find, I would argue that critics do this. That's the whole reason people go down this rabbit hole of trying to figure things out, is because they are seeking and trying to find the truth. And I wholeheartedly believe that if you are seeking truth, you are on a path outside of Mormonism. I was talking with my wife, I think, about this. I said, there's only two paths that I really see people go down when they start taking the church seriously and their religion seriously. In regards to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Mormonism, you either become fully orthodox and you join one of the polygamist sects because you realize that the current church is an apostasy and not in concordance with earlier teachings, and you start to take those seriously, and you become even more radicalized, or you leave the church. I really do think that's the only two options for those who are genuinely truth-seeking and trying to figure things out. I really don't see a middle ground there. I guess a middle ground would be maybe not people find out it's false and choose to stay in the church, because that's definitely a thing that happens, and they become almost secular Mormons. But yeah, I think this is very true. I think it's applicable in regards to finding truth. I have interacted with critics for years. Yeah, what was it? When we did the math last time, it was 4 years before and then 10 years till he wrote this letter. So it was 2014 he went through his faith crisis. I think I had messed up earlier. It said 2004. It's 2014, 4 years earlier. So, I mean, it's been at least 10 years. Some are well-intentioned and believe they're doing the right thing. I would say most of them. From others, I get the impression that misery loves company. I could see that being on a more personal level, or interacting with random Twitter users, sure. It was not enough to leave. Their goal, mission, vision, and conquest is to tear down faith in God, to dismantle belief in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I would say that this is not a good characterization of Bill Reel or John Dehlin. But I know, I'm trying to remember her name. I know that there is one prominent Mormon critic who's pretty outspoken. Nuance Ho, I think, is the handle she goes by. And the question is, it's so easy to see why this happens, and it's easy to demonize them, like, it isn't good enough for them. But it's just such a simple, like I'm going to open up Paint here. It's like, it's just basic human nature, right? If we have a group here, okay, my whole family's in this group, okay, 1, 2, 3. And I leave the group, okay? I'm out of the church, okay? And then I see, from my perspective outside of the church, like, this is harmful. It is harming these individuals from my position outside. They can't see from the inside, but I can see from the outside. This is harming them. Any human being who cares about their significant others, their family members, would then try to help them get out of this circle. And if you are empathetic enough and you see other people, why wouldn't you also want to try and help them? So her perspective, Nuance is she genuinely sees the issues and the damage and the harm that the church causes. Because I mean, that's not even it. You can be a member of the church and a full believing member, and it's just intellectually honest to admit that there's harm caused by the church. Absolutely. Especially with their newest policy about transgender individuals. I mean, to think that you're not going to harm someone by telling them, hey, I don't even know why I have this open. Hey, you can't go in our bathrooms. You can't stay overnight at activities. You can't hold any calling or any prominent calling with children. And then second degree child or sex offenders can hold those positions and don't have to be accompanied to go into bathrooms. What message does that send? Like, even if you disagree with what they're doing, they haven't done anything criminal, and you're treating them worse than you do criminals, sex offenders. So I just, I don't know. I definitely see, like, some people's goals is to help people leave, like the Lighthouse Ministry, because they see it as being wrong. And that's another thing. If it is like setting everything aside, and I could have done this exercise as a member. Okay, so if you are a fully believing member, I have confidence in you. You can do this and you can follow. If the church wasn't true, full stop, wouldn't you want other people to leave it? Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you want them to be, you felt deceived? Oh my gosh, this thing I thought it was true, it's not. I've been abstaining from all these things that I do. Like I haven't drunk coffee or tea or alcohol. I've given 10% of my income. My underwear that I wear is only their underwear. Every single Sunday of my life and Monday and Wednesday has been dedicated to this cause. Every single morning and night or whatever, I've been praying and reading my scriptures. If you had dedicated all of that, and you see other people doing it too, and you know that it's not true, if it isn't true, it could be true. I'm not saying say it's not true. I'm just saying you can put yourself in the shoes of, hey, if it's not true, yeah, isn't it just obvious that it follows you would want other people to know that? I just feel like it's so silly to paint that as evil. It's so easy to understand from either side. Did this man to believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? At times, I feel like I was listening to someone with nothing more than a personal vendetta to disparage the church. Who are you listening to? From Art FM to Bill Reel to John DeLynn to almost anyone he interviews, I have not gotten this from them. Mike from LDS Discussions, Nemo the Mormon. None of this is true about any of them, and I feel like they're all some of the most prominent names out there. I'm sure some of these folks genuinely feel wronged by the Church of Jesus Christ, and I'm sorry they feel that way. Regardless of their personal grievances, my mission is to find more light and truth. I'm sure this hurts and upsets, and you guys genuinely feel hurt by this, but I don't care, because I'm just trying to find out what's right. I'm trying to find more light and truth. You don't even need to put this on the end, dude. You can just say, I'm sorry they feel that way. Why do you have to say, regardless of how other people feel? Some critics like John DeLynn, from Mormon Stories, provide coaching services. Oh, I did read this in my first thing when I first had picked it up before I decided to make a series. I think I had not even got to the Book of Mormon, but I think I'd read this intro. Providing coaching services for people who have left the church to help them handle the trauma of leaving their church community. Is that a conflict of interest? Is it right for a critic to actively influence a victim into a faith crisis and then charge for groups and counseling sessions for handling the crisis? Okay. I have to, this one. So, I'm John DeLynn. I have a background, I have a PhD in psychology. I then find out after getting that and after offering therapy, I then find out that the church isn't true. Using my therapeutic tools, I can help myself. And I realize from my background, I can help other people who have gone through this. There is not a therapist who can help you as well as someone who has been in it before. Because of the cult-like behaviors that are provably evident in Mormonism. They follow cult listed behaviors. There's the bite model. There's so many different behaviors that do fall into the definition of cult. I'm not even calling it a cult. I'm just saying there are cult-like things within the church. There are so many cultural things that cannot and will go unaddressed by a therapist who does not have a background in Mormonism. If I'm struggling with specifically leaving the Mormon church, I think it is very different. It is a high demand religion. It's different than leaving any other religion. It is, Mormonism has so much that it fills so many holes in your life that when you leave it, so much of your life is just left torn open, and you haven't dealt with any of it up until this point. And I go over some of that in my previous videos, the 4 existential fears of Mormonism. Oh, and Mormonism. Not of. So, first off, he wasn't doing this. He didn't start Mormon Stories to provide coaching services. When he first started Mormon Stories, he wasn't making any money off of it for a really long time, for years and years and years. And then he realizes, after the way he explains it, he was getting so many messages every day, and he's trying to help these people because they're like, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to get divorced. My wife is leaving me. I'm going to lose my kids. There's so many problems. And so he's like, I want to help these people, but I cannot see everyone. Naturally, he's going to provide coaching, and his coaching is less than therapy. The therapist that I see charges less than John Deline's coaching, which is not even therapy, and you don't have to participate in the coaching. And John Deline gave away Gift of a Mormon Faith Crisis for free. Free. This is some of the best therapy and coaching you will ever get when going through a Mormon faith crisis, and he gave it away for free. He offers coaching for specific problems, for individuals that feel like they want specific coaching from him, but he has offered this for free entirely. How to go through it. He's brought on professional therapists to do this, to help him build this podcast, and this made him nothing. This was not a successful venture for him, not nearly as successful as his normal Mormon stories, and he chose to do it, 70-plus episodes. So I don't see how this is, like, I understand why you would look at that and make, is this a conflict of interest? But because of the context, it is not a conflict of interest in my mind. Once again, if you leave the Mormon church, I believe you need a deconstruction therapist who has a knowledge and cultural background in Mormonism to help you with your specific issues, because there are things that normal therapists are just not going to understand. Is it right for a critic to actively influence a victim into a faith crisis? Once again, this is judging the intentions and motivations of John Deline, because I don't believe he actively influences people into a faith crisis. He brings on apologists. He brings on believing members, non-believing members, members from all over the world. He created a whole series of LDS discussions where they were just trying to be as completely neutral as possible. I sincerely do not believe John is trying to actively influence victims into having a faith crisis. Also, he has donors that can help you. For groups, let's take his Thrive groups, for example, or his retreats and getaways. He literally provides options. He says, if you can't afford this and you need this, email me, and we will work it out where you can get the help you need, and we'll set up someone to either fund you or we'll work something out. So it's not even like, and then he charges. It is in such good faith, it's insane that you would even call him out like this. It just goes to show that the little research that Austin has done into actually seeing the issue. I'm going to bring up a parallel example. On its face, like this, if I outline it like this, oh, it looks bad. On its face, big pharma and vaccines can look bad. Whoa, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, vaccines. Of course, they want to vax our kids, and it looks so bad. Follow the money. And then you realize how much money they lose because they vaccinate you, and they no longer have to treat you for the myriad of diseases that they're vaccinating you against. They actually there was an independent study that analyzed just how much money the medical system loses because of vaccines, because those diseases are no longer present, or we don't have to deal with them as often, and we don't need to provide that medical care. And it significantly outweighs the money that they make. So on its face, you could sit here and be like, well, follow the money with big pharma and vaccines. But then actually just thinking about it for 2 seconds, you're like, oh, they're actually losing so much more than they're gaining by doing that. Maybe I'm just like stupid and didn't think about it and didn't actually look into it for more than 2 seconds. I just read it on its face. Sorry. Getting a little feisty. I know that that's trying to not do that, but I mean, you know what? If I get feisty, I get feisty, okay? It is what it is. I've seen many disillusioned former church members share their faith deconstruction stories. Some are emotional messes after their crisis. Yeah, reasonably so, and I would expect almost everyone. I wish the best for those folks. Like you didn't. If you went through it, you would know. I'm sorry. Austin claims he went through this. You would know how emotionally intense that is to go to your wife and say, hey, I'm out. You're going to tell me that you weren't an emotional mess coming to your wife, that you weren't freaking out? I hope they find the peace that they seek. I find it deeply immoral for critics to share half-truths and false narratives, like the half-truths you shared previously, that we've gone over previously, Austin, and false narratives with the intent of convincing their victims to turn their lives upside down in a faith crisis. Except for every single time, for example, in the LDS discussion series, they directly address the apologetics, and then they literally say, hey, you can still continue believing. And another example, with David Bokovoy or with Dan McClellan, there are entire episodes where all John does is say, hey, how can we help members stay in the church and still accept biblical or critical scholarship or still contend with these issues? And they'll just talk about it for hours, literal hours. So I don't know what this false narrative is with the intent of convincing their victims. Like this is, it's a characterization of critics. This mortal existence is finite, and eternities are forever. The stakes could not be any higher. I agree. The mortal existence is finite, and stakes cannot be any higher. Because if you, as an individual, dedicate your whole life, and let's just, if it isn't true and eternities don't exist, this is all you have. Stakes are insanely huge. How are you going to live your life? This is all you have. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do if you can't just count on the eternities? I can't tell you how many people I've met with that hold such a toxic view because they're like, well, I'll just wait until the next life. Or, yeah, my body sucks. I can't wait to die and go into the next life. I can't wait. I hope the second coming's tomorrow. Life sucks. When those people could put that energy into, I don't know, maybe making your life better. Update. Oh, update. Didn't this come out once again in 2024? In recent years, critics of the church have de-emphasized how much happier they are since leaving the church in favor of a narrative, emphasizing how hard it is to leave. I'll read the whole thing, we'll talk about this. This is likely intentional to convince their targets that exiting the church is the hard thing but the right thing to do. It may also help resolve some cognitive dissonance in leaving. Cognitive dissonance? What? The reality is that while it may initially be challenging to abandon a belief system, while it may, no, we can just get rid of that whole entire statement there. It takes deep discipline over a lifetime to be a faithful disciple of Jesus Christ. A few months or years of faith deconstruction does not outweigh the lifelong service of selfless sacrifice to God and mankind. To be an atheist is to be culturally relevant and celebrated. Atheists are not bullied at the university or places of employment for their beliefs. To be a believer is to move against the cultural current of skepticism. Following Christ is hard to do. It always has been. You can hear the snarkiness if you pay attention to it. And you can hear the loaded language. This is likely intentional to convince their targets. Dude, I don't have to convince anyone. This has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, was deconstructing my belief system. And you would know that, Austin, if you went through that. Which is why I'm very suspicious. Like, you claim to have been there. And from your rhetoric, it seems like you haven't even dipped a toe in. It is challenging, no matter what belief system it is, to deconstruct. It absolutely is a hard thing. Even if the church is true, it is a hard thing to leave the church. It's not like we came up with this narrative. It's always been hard. And I think that even people who left initially talked about how hard it was. And I don't know where this idea of they've de-emphasized how much happier they are since leaving the church. It's like, first off, I still I still read comments of people who say they're much happier outside. But once again, I don't care if you're happier or not happier. It's the Truman Show to me. It doesn't matter whether or not the Truman Show was better for Truman or if he was quote unquote happier in the show. At the very end, no one wants him to go back into the show. Once you know that there's more out there, once you know the truth, you can't go back. It doesn't matter if you're happier or not. I would argue the truth is more important. It's like I was probably happier when I believed in Santa Claus. But like now that I don't believe in Santa Claus, I'm not sitting here like, man, I just wish I got to make it work somehow. And like I was so much happier back then. It's like, yeah, dude, I was a kid. And like I wouldn't want to go back there. I'm a mature adult now. So I just don't. In recent years, I mean, how recent are we talking? I feel like all the way back in like 2012, John Dillon was talking about how hard it was. Also, this may help resolve some cognitive dissonance in leaving. Cognitive dissonance is when I hold two conflicting thoughts at once. So I don't know what he's referring to with the cognitive dissonance. If I don't believe the church is true and I leave it, there's no cognitive dissonance. The cognitive dissonance occurs when I believe the church isn't true and I stay in the church. Also, it takes deep discipline over a lifetime to be a faithful disciple of Jesus Christ. I think it takes a deep discipline to set aside your dogmas and to take the time to actually dig into the apologetics and the rebuttals and the history and to think for yourself. I think it takes integrity and honesty and authenticity. And I think that discipline over a lifetime does not matter if the cause for your discipline isn't true or is unjust. You could have been the most deeply disciplined Nazi ever, and it doesn't necessarily make that the right thing to do or even the hard thing to do. I think the hard thing would have been to go up against the regime, to speak out against it, to risk dying. I think the easy thing is to stay enmeshed in your community and to just ignore or put aside the issues, put them on your shelf. I think that I truly think that the majority of people I engage with, I'm thinking of John Dillon and Bill Reel and RFM and myself, I've never been more clear on who Jesus Christ was as a person, his teachings, and how I follow my Mormon upbringing. I've never taken it more seriously. I've never felt more like this idea that like I'm in a really funny, ironic way. I truly think that the critics of the church are living Christ-like principles better than some of the people that I find within the church that I engage with. Sure, there's some within the church that don't fall into that category, but I'm thinking of members who just flat out refuse to engage and don't want to look into these issues further, despite Joseph Smith teaching so critically that knowledge is how we will attain exaltation, that we should study out of the best books, that we study by, or we learn by study and also by faith, rather than passive life, blind faith. This is just, I don't even know how to address this whole thing, but especially this last one, I just, in a weird way, I'm still trying to live out Christ's teachings to the best of my ability and to seek truth, kind of like my Mormon upbringing told me how I should seek truth, how I should be a truth seeker, how authenticity and history matter. Also, to be an atheist is to be culturally relevant and celebrated. Atheists are definitely not the majority, which is funny. I don't even think atheism is celebrated. I think there's a huge movement for Christian nationalism. There's a huge resurgence in orthodoxy right now, Catholic orthodoxy, as well as in Islam. And these are all growing at rapid rates. I think to be an atheist is to naturally be progressive and to actually put yourself against your culture. You're not culturally relevant being an atheist in Utah. You're not culturally relevant being an atheist in the Bible Belt. You're not culturally relevant maybe in like some of the most liberal cities out there. And celebrate is so weird. It's like, what? Like, this is just weird rhetoric. It's so hard to even address almost. Atheists are not bullied at the university or places of employment for their beliefs. Full stop. I don't think I was ever bullied for my beliefs at any place of employment. And from what I hear from family members and from people I know, they've never been bullied because of their belief systems either. I don't see how atheism is even... I would say atheists actually do quite often find themselves in contentious predicaments with believers. I don't... This is so weird. Atheists are not bullied at the university or places of employment for their beliefs. I'm pretty sure if I was atheist at BYU, I would be bullied. This is just a weird... I don't even know if I feel comfortable saying that. There's just such... Once again, this is just really strange rhetoric to me. To be a believer is to move against the cultural current of skepticism. You can be a believer and be a skeptic. That's another thing I don't understand. Following Christ is hard to do. It always has been. Just had to put that in there. I agree, actually. I think following Christ is hard to do. It was just my little soapbox, but one thing that I'm really big on, I would recommend you go check out Nemo the Mormon, is the current modern day prophets and apostles are very bad at following Christ and at practicing what they preach and really just, living their actual beliefs out. So yeah, I actually think that this is a true statement, and it is evidenced in the fact that there's just rampant corruption and dishonesty among our supposed highest leaders in the church. Once again, I think following Christ's example, going against the authority, the religious authority at the time, looking within for the kingdom of heaven, being a truth seeker, standing up for what you believe in. I align a lot with Christ. All right, next section. The internet. The CES letter lambasts the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for encouraging members to use divinely appointed sources when researching challenging gospel questions. I admit that this advice from church leaders had bothered me for some time. Was I only to look at the church's approved list of reading material? It felt suspicious to me. Then I learned why the church's invitation to use divinely appointed resources is more reasonable than I gave it credit for. Oh, is it now? The internet is a great place to find out when Taco Bell closes, but ask Google which political party to vote for. Should I be pro-choice or pro-life? How about pro-Palestine or pro-Israel? Is the Mormon Church a cult? I mean, the problem is with the actual terminology and definitions of a cult, but does the Mormon Church have cult-like practices in it? Yes. Yikes. Anything remotely controversial on the internet is a mess of disinformation and propaganda. I agree. You are part of the disinformation and propaganda, by the way. Austin 5. This letter already, just in the manipulations and fallacy section, has included a lot of disinformation. And the propaganda piece here, this is not neutral language. This is almost as inflammatory as the CES letters, which, by the way, I also don't like the language of the CES letter. I find it to be very angry, bitter, and inflammatory as well. I think a more balanced one would probably be a letter for my wife. The annotated essays, those are great. Even LDS discussions and his written essays. All of those are way more neutral and balanced. And they actually actively are not disinformation and propaganda. By the way, I could write you a list right now that would take you out of the church, only using divinely appointed sources. Full stop. I am confident I can use the Mormon Church to take you out of the Mormon Church if I wanted to. I would start with, obviously, the gospel topic essays. We went through this last episode, but gospel topic essays. Only church approved, right? I would take you here. I would say, hey, I want you to read through each and every single one of these. And anytime it cites something, for example, if we click on, we did this last time, race in the priesthood, I would say, hey, anytime it cites a quote, there's the thing. We're going to use only church-approved things. I know I'm blown out, by the way, because it's a bright white screen. But I'm gonna say, as we read this, you are going to click on every single cited thing, and you're going to go to every single footnote or whatever here, and we're going to read through all of them. If they quote a prophet, we're going to go through it. And you're going to quickly find how the church hides and misrepresents things just using only church-approved sources by comparing it to the quote versus what is actually said on the Joseph Smith papers. I can take you out of the church very easily, only using the Joseph Smith papers. For example, I can show you from the church's own website them celebrating more changes to the temple, and then I can show you in the Joseph Smith papers where Joseph Smith himself says, hey, temple endowment should not be changed, removed, or added upon. How do you rationalize that? It has been radically changed. And people say, oh, just the presentation of it's been changed. No, it hasn't. We're talking full-blown ordinances have been completely cut out and changed and removed from that ordinance. Loud laughter being a funny, recent, but still evident example. That's taken out of the covenant now. So all of that's church approved. You can't rationalize that away. Joseph Smith restores the gospel. He says, this thing I restored shouldn't change. And now we have the modern church celebrating that change. Gotcha. I would also take you out. Honestly, I think if you just read what are they called? They're the first 20 things of General Conference, but they're not canon and they're not really. Church likes to not point towards them. What are they called? The first books on General Conference. What are they called? Journal of Discourses. I remembered it. Journal of Discourses. I mean, this is, I don't know what this is, but Journal of Discourses, JesusChrist.org. You can get these books. We can go through the entire thing. Once again, just reading through the Journal of Discourses and taking your faith seriously, you're going to realize that the Journal of Discourses does not match up with what our current and modern church is. Other divinely appointed sources, if we want to get a little more loose with it, you could read Rough Stone Rolling, and that could take you out of the church. You could, just that one outlines issues pretty heavily. I don't know if prophetical works count as a divinely appointed source, like books that the prophets have written, but I mean, you're out. I can take you out. I can take you out a lot faster with other things, but anyways. False news online travels 6 times faster than the truth. According to a 2018 study by researchers from MIT, a lie online is clean and short. The truth has depth and takes time to understand. According to the non-scientific internet adage of Brandolini's law, the amount of energy needed to refute BS is an order of magnitude bigger than that needed to produce it. Yeah, take the Mormon Church, for example. And take the amount of effort that I have to put in to dismantling your letter, Austin. It's ridiculous. A great example of this, by the way, would be if we go to YouTube and we type in Ward Radio Golden Plates. If this is still up, that's insane. Let me see. Golden Plates found. They must have taken it down because it was a lie. Hold on. Golden plates found. So this is one. Possible golden plates found in Saudi Arabia. I'm trying to find. Ward Radio did one. They must have taken it down. Anyways, this is Dan McClellan. It must be this. I know Ward Radio did one. These plates came out. They were forgeries. It blew up on Mormon Twitter, on Mormon social medias. And Dan McClellan had to come along. And he had to break it apart for over an hour just to deconstruct and prove how these were a forgery. Because he is a biblical scholar and he knows Hebrew. And he can break down what the plates are actually saying. Yeah, that's so interesting. I know that when this happened, I just remember seeing it blowing up among Mormon communities. Anyways, who was right then? It was the critics. But yeah, I would agree. Short, quick, and easy to understand answers are the most appealing at first glance. Oh, like the ones up here that I had to break down? Or your statement about John DeLynn that I had to break down? Because it was very quick, short, and easy to understand? More so with the advent of social media. When confronted with challenging and unflattering information, it is tempting to accept it. Also, by the way, short, quick, and easy to understand answers are the most appealing at first glance. Like your letter? Like Mormon apologetics? Or, I'm sorry, are we talking about the short, quick, easy to understand? Are we talking about this? Is this what we're talking about? The short, quick, and easy to understand? Yeah, it looks... Oh, this is short to me, right? Seems quick and easy to understand. This is one topic out of, I don't know, what was it? Over 60? Seems short, quick, and easy to understand to me, right? Oh, man, look at how many parts. Oh, shoot. Short, quick, and easy to understand, huh? Wow. Yep, this seems like I'm going to accept this. This looks like he's just telling me to leave the church, I think. Yeah, he doesn't have any evidence here. I don't know what those are. It just looks like he wrote those in paint, huh? Yeah. Come on, Austin. Who are you criticizing with this? Tell me who. Tell me who, dude. Nothing about anything I've read against the church has been easy to understand. You know what's easy to understand? The church's apologetics. Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't even think they're that easy to understand. They're just convoluted and they get so murky so quick. But, like, dude, nothing about the critics is telling people, here's the easy information. They'll talk for hours on one topic, dude. I've easily ingested thousands of hours. Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to try and make it just through the internet here. And then we'll have to pick up on illusions and mirages after. Okay. It is tempting to accept that at times it felt easier for me to say the church was lying to me, lying and that Joseph Smith was a fraud, and knowing the whole story would take too much effort. You don't know the whole story. When I realized this, I started to see how manipulative critics of the church can be with the use of the internet. They want to capitalize on the natural tendency to want simple answers with little work. Yeah, I don't see anything that's simple or little about the work that any critics do. Bruce and Marie Haffen elaborate on this problem in their book, Faith is Not Blind. They share a story about a bishop who meets with ward members who have been rattled by a phrase or story taken out of context by some event or statement they do not understand in church history. That's funny. I think the more context that I have around church history, the more bullshiz the church's answers seem to me. Or some statement that they took out of context, like the one from Brigham Young in the Race and the Priesthood essay. I'm sorry, I just can't. They lacked experience to sense the need for more context, or they don't know how to find, like the context we needed for John DeLynn, they don't know how to find the context. Or despite feeling shattered, they still sometimes don't care enough to look for it. Like you? It's crazy the amount of, like, the lack of self-reflection that comes to me. The problem is not that they know too much about church history, but that they don't know nearly enough. Where's the quote for this, dude? Isn't this like the lawyer who said this from the church? Because they fired all the historians? Oops. I mean, not fired, excommunicated. Sorry, excommunicated all the historians, the September 6th. And they have been conditioned by the oversimplifications of social media to expect a short answer to any question. They often aren't interested in a long answer to anything. Oh, like how no member of the church is interested in my long videos here? I shouldn't say that. I'm sure some of you are watching. But this just isn't true. I found the opposite. I found that members of the church they'll ask you on the spot, okay, tell me how Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon. And then you're like, okay, this is going to take like genuinely maybe 3 to 4 hours for me to talk to you about it and to show you all the sources and show my proofs for it and to link to you all the things and to show you all the evidences of why. They're not going to sit through that. They just want a quick answer. That's not from critics, dude. Even if the true complete story is very complex. I was, and in some way still am, one of these members. I did not know nearly enough, even after engaging with critics of the church for years. Part of the problem is that I have a job and family. Who has the time, resources, and capacity to become a historian and a scholar overnight? Well, it's not overnight. You had 10 years. That's the trick. I can feel critics egging me on to shift the burden of proof onto the church. All the critic has done is share a half-truth with a negative implication. This tactic has a dark motive and is very effective for propagandists. Over time, I found that the negative narrative spun by critics almost always had a good answer. All I had to do was learn more. I found the opposite. I found every single answer I've ever been given from Fair Mormon, any apologetic book that I've ever read. Not only do I know more context than what is currently being offered to me, I can see the blatant misrepresentation, out of context quote, and false narrative presented to me because I actually know more. Thanks to the critics. Tell me a story. Like, here's a great example. A critic would say, hey, the Book of Abraham is a false translation. And then an apologist, because we have the scroll, and the scroll doesn't match up with the translation. And then, oh, okay, the apologist comes along, nah, you don't know the context. They talked about how there was scrolls so long that when they opened them up, they fell and bounced on the floor and they rolled out. It's called the long scroll theory. We only have a part of the scroll. Joseph had way more than we have now, so we can't call it a failed translation. And then you go, oh, wow, the critics didn't give me that context. Oh, man, they tried to deceive me. Oh, dang it. You want to know the full context, dude? That is a second-hand, it is from... Who's the prominent apologist? I got to go. I only got like 4 minutes. This guy went to write a book. I believe it's No Man, That's Not History. And he is trying to find people to help him refute it. And he finds someone who says, I heard from someone that when they were a kid. So this is a second-hand quote from someone remembering something from when they were a kid. It is not a first-hand account. It is a second-hand account talking about someone else. Second-hand account referencing someone else and when they were a kid. And then you also run into the context of the Book of Abraham identifies which parts of the scroll it's pulling from. So we know that the parts that it pulls from are mistranslated because the text directly addresses it. So that's the full context, very briefly. And then suddenly, whoa, the apologists tried to make it seem like the critics didn't have the full context. Turns out, the apologists didn't have the full context. Anyways, the first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. Theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg. I mean, we're not talking about God. I think you can still believe in God and still not believe in Mormonism and still be a skeptic and still, I like this quote, actually. A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring. Their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain. Drinking largely sobers us again. I would say you didn't drink deep, Austin, if I had to let you know. I think I dove all the way in. I think a little learning is a dangerous thing because then you get people who write entire letters just full of things that people have to spend hours, like me, I've spent hours debunking and going through line by line. A little philosophy inclineth man's mind to atheism, but depth and philosophy bringeth men's minds about to religion. Out of all the prominent philosophers I've listened to, this is not the case. And I love thinking about things theologically and philosophically. None of it has ever brought me back to religion. And maybe I'll have to make a video on that about how some of my biggest qualms with Christianity, with God, and with the Mormon Church are philosophical. I have learned that information is not the problem. Yeah, it is. That is the problem. That's why all of this started happening when the internet happened, because the access to information uh, is out there now. The real issue is the interpretation. Not really. In fact, the reason that they had to create the essays is because these things, there isn't an interpretation when it comes to the raw data of science indicating that Indians are not Lamanites. Where's the interpretation? It's not like anyone's misinterpreting that. Critics tried to convince me that they only shared what the church did not want me to know. When I examined carefully, I realized that most everything new, quote unquote, new the critics shared was relatively innocuous or came from church sources. Was relatively innocuous or came from church sources? What? When I examined, I realized that most everything new the critics shared was relatively innocuous or came from church sources. What about, is he saying that everything that the critics share comes from a church source? What about the book Glasslooker, where it talks about how Joseph Smith would slit the throats of dogs and engage in occult rituals? Ultimately, the manipulation happens in the presentation of data in history, not the data in history itself. I would definitely argue that the person manipulating data in history absolutely is apologists and the church. One manipulation that I'll point to is when the prophet of the time, was it Kimball or was it Joseph? It was Joseph Fielding Smith. Saw a problematic first vision account, cut it out of Joseph Smith's journal, locked it away in a private vault for years until he got called out for it and had to put it back. That's manipulation of history and data, by the way, to not let that account be out there. Okay, everyone, I'm going to have to wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Next up, I guess we're going to get into illusions and mirages, and we'll see if I can actually make it through here. But yeah, this was somewhat frustrating to listen to and to break down. But hopefully I offered somewhat of a decent rebuttal. Those are just my thoughts. I think it's ridiculous to say critics only tear down. They definitely have a proven track record of building up. And some things need to be torn down. Genuinely. And the internet too. I mean, just what he's writing applies to himself. It's crazy. Which is why it's so frustrating that he's so vague with quote unquote critics, because like I'm sure he can pull out of his back pocket like some stupid YouTube video of a not prominent critic saying some like doing some manipulation or fallacy or presenting incorrect data. But like when it comes to the biggest names out there, they're not doing these things. So also I just want to say one last thing. Who has the time, resources, and capacity to become a historian scholar overnight? It doesn't have to be overnight. You don't have to become a historian and a scholar. It's very easy to see the manipulations and the misinformation used by the church. I've outlined it very simply here for all of you. In fact, a lot of the times you just need 1 or 2 hours a day to listen. In fact, in regards to getting on the level of biblical scholars, Dan McClellan puts out 2 videos, usually under they're usually 3 to 5 minutes or less a day. If you just watch those 2 videos every day for 2 years, you will know so much about the Bible. It will be insane. It will change your life. By small and simple means are great things brought to pass, my friend. Not overnight. You have the time. You can make the time. You have the resources, especially in the modern age, to listen to a podcast on your way to work or on your way home from work, to listen to it at night, to read a book at night, to read 5 pages of a book at night. You can read a page in about a minute. It's not hard. 10 minutes a night, you can get through 10 pages. You can read history books. I don't care read Rough Stone Rolling, read church-approved books. You can do it. It's by small and simple means. And it's also pretty easy to verify. One thing I like to do is, hey, I'm not a scholar historian. Let me go to a scholar historian. Let me verify 2 or 3 claims that they make. I'll go verify them myself. I'll take the time to look into it. If it comes up true, I'm cool just believing the rest of what they say. Once you've proven to me that you are honest, that you're a truth teller, that you are not engaging in bad faith, you've gained my trust. And you can do that with people. And you can do that with the church in their own essays. And then you can realize, wow, you're engaging in bad faith. You're presenting things to me out of context. You're chopping quotes up. So, yeah, you can. And lastly, one last thing I'll say. you can trust a consensus of historians and a consensus of scholars rather than one historian or one scholar, because that's how it's supposed to work. You shouldn't just trust one scholar or one historian. But I don't know, maybe every Mormon historian that is like done prominent work on the Joseph Smith Papers Project or in Mormonism or worked in people's journals, maybe all the biblical scholars and their consensus, the academic consensus on critical scholarship of the Bible, why wouldn't you listen to that? It is the arguments or the history that the vast majority of historians or scholars agree upon. The chances of that being wrong when the majority consensus can see that, very low. And it's self-correcting. So if they did get it wrong, the more information we get, the longer time goes on, the more likely they are to self-correct and get closer to the truth. I'm out, everyone. See ya. I will pick this up later.